Good evening and welcome to Sunday Live right here on SABC 1. My name is Tumelo Mototwane. Well, as you can see, we're not live this evening. No. Actually, we are at the June 16 Memorial Acre right here in Jabavu, White City in Soweto. Well, actually, the Memorial Acre is right front opposite the Morris Axelson Secondary School right here in Soweto. And I'm standing right next to an icon, one of the men that actually led the protest back in June 16, 1976. And his name is, of course, Tsietsi Mashinini. Well, this is actually a statue here to commemorate and honor the legacy that he has left for not only the learners and students of Soweto, but of course of South Africa at large. Well, of course, as we embrace and commemorate June 16, we're going to delve into discussions around the past Bantu education and as well as the education system in 2015. But before we get into that discussion, let's take a look at this insert prepared by Refuile Muilo.
I want to speak to my children, those who have been forced out of their homes in the middle of the night and those who remain sleeping, warm and comfortable beds, those who walk barefoot towards uncertain futures and those who have been swept under exile's rug. I want to speak to the youth of 76, the children of Sierra Leone, the lost boys of Sudan. I want to hold each one of them in my arms and whisper courage into their ears. Tell them that they will spark revolutions.
The June 16, 1976 uprising that began in Soweto and spread countrywide, undeniably and profoundly so, changed the socio-political landscape in South Africa forever. But why? Why did it come to be that the youth decided to take such a radical stance? A volatile time in history for black and white South Africa. For this generation of black students, Afrikaans was the language of the police and their employers and an instrument for giving orders. They believed that the imposition of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction in an already frustrating system of Bantu education was designed to train them for servitude and a means of suppressing them from advancing educationally. It wasn't just a matter of language, it was tied up with intelligence. It was due to these problems that at the end of May 1976, student leaders in Soweto traveled secretively from school to school to rally fellow students to protest against Afrikaans, and what was intended as a peaceful protest march went horribly wrong when students were confronted by the police and violence broke out, culminating in the Soweto riots. Soweto went up in smoke, and the flames spread like wildfire to other townships. The riots proved that children of school-going age were a potential political force in their own right. The process leading up to the Soweto uprising saw black school-going youth catapult themselves to the forefront of militant opposition to apartheid. And as history has proved since time immemorial, every revolution has its casualties. Little did he know the role that he was playing, but the impeccably timed click of Sam Nzima's camera on that fateful day of a dying Hector Peterson in Mbuyiseni Makhubu's arms heightened the world's awareness to what was going on in South Africa, an iconic image that today rests at the Hector Peterson Memorial Site and Museum.
Well, of course, that was an insert prepared by Refuile Muilo right here on Sunday Live, just highlighting what the youth of 1976 had to go through and some of the sacrifices they had to make to fight off the Bantu education system that they felt was not fit for them. But of course, the gentleman joining me, of course, today to ensure that we get an understanding, a thorough understanding, that is, of what transpired and where they'd like to see the youth of today go, of course, are joining me today. And I'd like to introduce them to you. I'm joined by, of course, from my left, Mr. Dan Munsisi, who is the Deputy Chairperson of the June 16 Foundation. He's also joined by Mr. Titi Ntenjani, the current Chairperson of the June 16 Foundation. We're also joined by Mr. Opa Mulado, of course, who is the project manager. We're also joined by Mr. Tsepo Maposa, who is in charge of student affairs. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. Welcome to Sunday Live.
Pleasure.
Mr. Dan, what really triggered the protests in 1976? What was the fight of the youth of 1976?
Well, the fight of the youth of 1976 was quite diverse, because in terms of the problems that were confronting young people at that time, it was not only educational, it was social as well, political as well. But you can well imagine in township schools where the language has been the medium of English for a very long time, not that we hero worship English, not that we are saying English is the best language, but what we are saying is that that has been the current language of instruction for a very long time. And then all of a sudden, the government of the day, the government of Hendrik Verwoerd of the past, begins now to introduce a language that is not very, young people are not very familiar with that language. And secondly, it was regarded as the language of the oppressor. Now, they were expecting young people who have been instructed through the medium of English to begin now to study maths in Afrikaans, to study science in Afrikaans, to study geography, biology in Afrikaans. That was very difficult.
So, Ndadititi, then what happened? Young people then decided that they found the language difficult to understand. They found it quite unfair that they had to endure this curriculum that was more so imposed on them. What then happened?
Well, for that period, young people engaged with the department. We had engagement on the issue around that language. Our parents became involved, but no one listened.
It's interesting that debates have taken place, that discussions took place, and it's also quite fascinating for me to know that I'm sitting with founders, SRC founders of your various schools back in 1976. But back when, I mean, I know now you're the student affairs. After the discussions had taken place, we know that protests were the next in line. Was violence the initial strategy when protesting? And if not, how did it end up being violent? How did it end up that people were killed?
Remember that in 1976, when learners or students marched against the use of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction, they were just there to record their dissatisfaction. But unfortunately, the answer was tear gas and bullets and killings.
We were from Maurice Isaacson High. We passed through the offices of sociologist by the name of Dr. Hellenstein. Actually was waving to the students when they were passing there to show that how peaceful that march was. When we went through Sizwe stores, we met a police car, but there was no confrontation between the students and the police until we arrived at Orlando West. The Hector Peterson was the first student to be caught by camera, that is Simon Zimas. But Hastings Ndlovu was the first to be shot at the bridge around Orlando West. And then it was followed by Hector Peterson. Of course, the list is endless of people who became the victims of 1976. And the key figures in the march of 1976, in terms of leading the march, was the members of SSRC led by Tsetsi Mashinini and Mefison Morobe Seth Maseboko.
Yeah. And Mr. Dan, I mean, after, finding out that lives were lost, which I can understand was not the initial plan, lives were lost, young lives were lost. There were young people who fell prey and victim to what, the founders of the SRC had started initially as, a peaceful protest to end Bantu education. What was then the plan afterwards? Did that discourage you in any way to continue fighting off the Bantu education system?
Well, there was anger. As soon as there was a response by violence from the powers that be, there was anger across the board. Students decided that they are going to come up with campaigns in order to challenge the frontiers of apartheid, to challenge Bantu education, and to challenge Afrikaans as a medium of instruction. And then the demands of the students went further. They began to chant slogans and write placards about the release of political leaders. And they also started to target the release of Nelson Mandela in particular. As early as 1976, the students was making those type of demands. And again, the students began to make the type of demands that said, away with Bantu education, and we want an inclusive education, and we want free education.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Den, I have to leave it there, unfortunately, for now. This is Sunday Live. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sunday Live. Well, this is our special June 16 broadcast right here, of course, in Soweto. We're taking a look back at, June 16, 1976, and we're also treading very carefully to 2015 to understand how far we've come as a country and as far as our education system is concerned. Now, I'm so honored to be in the presence of, some of the people that contributed, of course, to where we are today. I'm talking about some of the founding SRC members of the students of 1976. They're joining us today, but also amongst current learners of 2015 who will also be sharing, of course, their points and their statements with us. So I'll just take it back, straight to our audience members. Welcome.
Well, what I know about 1976 is that the youth of 1976 were fighting for their freedom due to socially and also in education. They were fighting for their schools to have equipment and also to have libraries. They had less laboratories and also sport facilities. And also they didn't want this Bantu education because they felt that it was oppressing them. Whites were gonna gain more education and black people were gonna be working for unskilled labor, and they didn't benefit anything from that. So looking at it, black people were gonna work for small wages while white people will rule them. So at the end of the day, black people wouldn't be up there. There wouldn't be big people. We wouldn't even rely on them or look upon them. We'll always lean on whites, and that wouldn't be fair. So that's why they were fighting for their freedom in education so that they could be equal.
I just look back from where I come from, my background and everything that is happening, also the struggles of 1976. Obviously, they worked for us very hard. Those students, they had an ambition. They wanted to see South Africa and the generation that was upcoming. They wanted to see us, enjoying the fruits. They just wanted to see us taking our education very seriously. The government is trying very hard. Even they're giving us feeding schemes at schools, some free books for education. So the only thing that we have to do is to take it very seriously, to grab it with us and go with it.
Dada Titi, what was your personal role in all that occurred back in 1976? Perhaps not even just on the day, but perhaps prior to the day and afterwards.
Well, my personal role then, I was representing the school. Representing us currently, of course, we know that we have representatives that will take charge of what students want and what are the challenges at school and all. So my personal role then, as a representative of the school that I belong, it was to look after the interests of what we want to learn, what are the challenges. Now, as we have indicated, of course, that the challenges of our time, it was an issue that came about when the government introduced the Africans. We had to communicate with our parents. We have to deal with that challenge itself to say, these are the challenges that we find. We can't go and advise each other about you have to move from the maths, you go to do Veskende. How do I help each other about that? It was a very, 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 very challenging itself. So these are the challenges that of the day, and the challenges that we had is to how then we make everybody to understand what we are getting, what is the problem that we are facing by then.
Absolutely. But what went through your mind, when you saw images of screaming learners, images of young kids running, parents being worried, some being shot dead, and knowing that you were a part of this revolution?
In my school at Naledi High, a learner, Innocent Gujani, he wrote a letter to the Minister of Bantu Education, Mr. M.C. Puotha, to say we cannot do all this subject in Afrikaans. And the security forces, they were called the special branch by then, and which came to Naledi High School to come and arrest him. And on that day, unfortunately, the learners were very angry. So they took this car of the police, turning around and set it alight. It was the first defeat of the apartheid security forces inside the schoolyard. When a dog is at the corner, even if it doesn't bite, but when you put it in that corner, it takes out its best. And this is what apartheid system did to us. By introducing Afrikaans, they didn't know that it was the last nail in the apartheid coffin, that the education system in this country will never be the same.
Absolutely.
By learners in 76.
Who are other, unsung heroes that participated during the struggle?
CAC was the first chairperson of the SSRC. Khotso followed. And I took after Khotso, which meant I'm the third president of the SSRC. But what happened was that you become more targeted because they think that if you can able to arrest the leader, then they'll be able to arrest the rest of the members of the SSRC. But it was not to be, because most of our teachers during that time and the parents during that time were able to provide us with accommodation, with food, and a new change of clothes. So our activities in 1976 were supported by our parents, irrespective of where you could find them. In the hospitals, for instance, when we were shot, most of the doctors who were around Soweto, most of those doctors, we did not pay a cent.
Wow.
These were activists who were sought by police. But now, you have the South African Schools Act that says learner students representative council should be elected by learners. And you have got a school governing body, not the school board. In the past, we had a school board which was appointed by the department. Now you have got a school governing body. These are some of the benefits. These are some of the victories which were won by the students of 1976. You have got one Department of Education. Afrikaans as a medium is no longer enforced. You see. You have a choice of a language that you can be able to do.
To be taught in.
In the past, you could not be able to access higher education. This current government has been able to install what you would call the National Students Finance Aid Scheme. So it doesn't mean when you pass matric, it is the be-all and the end-all. You have got the latitude to continue with your education.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Den, I have to leave it there, unfortunately, for now. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, of course, we're continuing with our discussion, of course, with some of, the students of 1976 that took to the forefront to ensure that they fought off what they felt and knew wasn't beneficial to them and their society and their education. But most are also going to be engaging with our current students of 2015 just to find out what they feel, what they think about what they've just heard, and of course their vision for, of course, their education. Well, if you want to be a part of the discussion, unfortunately we're not live, so you can't call me live into the show, but of course you can go to our social media on Twitter, on Facebook, and SMS yes or no. Do you think the students of 2015 are benefiting from, of course, the sacrifices of those that were students in 1976? This is Sunday Live. We'll be right back. We're here in 2015, of course, and the learners today are sharing some of the strides, but also challenges that they're currently facing. Well, of course, to take us through that discussion, we're now joined by the co-head of Equal Education, and that's Mr. Tshepo Motsepe, but also joined by a student, a 2015 matriculant from Pefeni Secondary School, and that is Vuyani Blanket. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you so much for joining the discussion.
Thank you for inviting us.
I will start off with you, Tshepo. You represent an organization known as Equal Education. And I mean, you've been currently making news of course, on TV and in newspapers, particularly in the Eastern Cape, with some of the campaigns that you have there fighting for equal rights. We know that that's part of, the Constitution to ensure that every child has a right to equal and adequate education in South Africa. But just in your opinion, how far have we come from 1976 to 1994 and now 2015 as far as education is concerned?
Well, Tumelo, we as a country we've come very far. We've actually have achieved quite a lot, both in terms of the law, but most importantly, we have 93% of young people in foundation level attending school. Particularly, in most of those kids are coming from black communities. So we have managed to create an adequate access sort of entry for young people to go to school. But challenges remain. And one of those challenges, I heard one of your guests here speaking about the laws that exist that enable young people to confront some of those challenges. Laws by themselves will not help us to achieve what we would like to see as an equal education system. We need men and women, young boys and girls, to engage with those laws to make sure that we realize those laws. So it cannot be just a law that guarantees us that we have adequate schooling and quality education. What exists currently in our education system are high levels of inequality. There's still a huge divide in terms of township schools and rural schools as compared to your former white schools, which, by the way, those white schools now are attended by the new emerging black middle class. The class divide is quite severe. We still have dysfunctional township schools. In fact, where you find very difficult conditions of learning and teaching, it is in rural places like your Eastern Cape and Limpopo. Also in Gauteng, where you have kids writing their exams on the floor, where you have kids learning in mud schools, where you have kids that walk 20 kilometers to school. Those are some of the challenges. And I think those challenges are not actually, the law will not by themselves get rid of those challenges. It will be political will that needs to come in to make sure that we push back against the legacy of apartheid. We push back against the legacy of inequality in the country. We push back against corrupt individuals that are found within the system, that are using the system. We push back against those that don't want to teach our children. We push back again, and we support those that actually, on a day-to-day basis, wake up in the morning to go to school and also go and teach our children.
Vianney, you are a learner on the ground. You're a grade 12 learner at Pefeni Secondary School, and I'm sure you see challenges firsthand, as you know, amongst your fellow learners, in terms of what you go through. Just take us through some of the challenges that you feel learners go through on a daily basis.
There's basically many challenges. Those challenges are part of the socio-economic issues. So those socio-economic issues are for example, poverty, unemployment, and HIV and AIDS, drugs, and etc. You know, those challenges are really affecting the youth of today because unemployment is really becoming a huge number in South Africa. If you're not employed, obviously you're gonna suffer from poverty.
I just want to comment on something that I know that here our fathers, they've done a major role by fighting for us and for our rights. So I just want to say that we as the youth of 2015, we have a major and a big role to play more and step ahead to do what they have done.
Back then, you know, teachers had respect for learners, but now things have changed. We see teachers dating school children. I just want to know that, is there something the SSRC can do about that situation?
All right, thank you so much. Interesting challenges that you're raising there.
The challenges that we're facing in my school is drug abuse, libraries, the facilities that we don't have, the books, late coming, sports facilities.
Well, my question is it's actually a comment, but it's a question at the same time. Because since you say that we had Bantu education, Indian education and all, but we feel as the youth of Aurora Girls High that the curriculums have been changed many times, from Bantu education to NCR, whatnots, and then now we are learning CABS. So do you think, are we actually benefiting from these things simply because we have been changing these curriculums each and every after 3 years? Do you actually think the teachers actually benefit from that because they learned in the Bantu, now they're learning the CABS, now we're going to go to another thing? Are we actually benefiting? Are we actually free?
Wow. You know, it's ironic that the youth of 76 challenged that particular curriculum, but now we have different curriculums that the government itself now is constantly changing, and, you know, learners have to then adapt. What are your views on that?
I think the issue of curriculum changes is inevitable. We need to deal with those changes. What I think should be critical is, how do we communicate those curriculum changes? so that young people, communities, parents, and everyone else, particularly teachers who are tasked with making sure that this curriculum is delivered to its recipients, which are the learners, understand what is it that they're teaching. Because where the gap exists, it's the teacher in this new curriculum, where teachers come out and say, where's the support that we were promised? What is this that I'm teaching? And the learners also coming up and saying, we don't understand where this is taking us, because we need to be prepared to take up future roles. So the issue of curriculum changes, I think the gaps that exist in terms of getting those that have to deliver the curriculum and the recipients of it needs to be closed down to make sure that everyone understands the intentions of this curriculum changes.
Tsapo, is this what you fought for in 1976? Did you have a picture of what is currently going on right now in 2015 when you, of course, protested and when you fought for education system and, of course, hopefully to benefit future generations? Is this what you fought for?
What we fought for is that every learner in this country must have an equal opportunity. Like right now, I can safely say question 1 in Sandton or in Bedford View is question 1 in Maurice Isaacson or Pefene High School. In the past, it was not like that. And the government is really pumping a lot of money in these activities to make sure that there is parity. And one of the biggest slice of the budget of the government is education. And the government is putting a lot of money in order to make sure that there are no disparities among people, and the schools that are disadvantaged, the government is putting a lot of money in those particular in order to elevate them to the level of other communities which were privileged in the past.
And
yes,
you may continue.
Okay, and right now we know for the fact that since after 1994. We see a lot of African children getting 16 shins, 17 shins, and so forth. And this was unheard in the past. And you could see that educators, because we say, if we don't invest in the youth, then we'll have a bleak future. And we make sure that all the people who are foot soldiers, educators, they make sure that they groom the future generation to make sure that we have a better country. And that is why, as I said, the government, the biggest slice of the cake of the budget of the country, the government put it on education to make sure that we do have sustainability.
Welcome back to Sunday Live right here on SABC 1. We are putting the spotlight on education, and we're trading back to June 16, 1976, so that we could just see some of the sacrifices and heroic, struggles and, protests that took place back then to bring us where we are today. Now, I want to involve my audience members because we've got quite amazing and brilliant learners amongst us here today. And, I want to ask you a question, guys, that we know that we come from not so ideal backgrounds. Some of us come from impoverished families. Some of us are exposed to drugs like weed, linyaupe in our schools. Some of us don't even have fancy science equipments in our classrooms. Yet we have a responsibility to pass. I need to know how you do it. Can we have someone to stand up, perhaps, yes, and let me know how you overcome against all odds?
I think it is up to an individual to succeed and persevere against all odds, because nowadays the government has provided us with unlimited information resources like libraries, computer labs at our schools. So I think we should not let where we come from determine where we're going, and use what we have to succeed. Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. So making the most with what you have and making it work for you.
I feel as if that you need to know as a person what you want and not think about your background and not think about that today I don't have anything to eat, but rather you as a person know what you want. You know what you want to have at the end of the day. You know your strengths, you know your weaknesses. So personally, you need to understand that you just need to have that persistence and optimism to know that no matter wherever I come from, but I know where I'm going and I will always stand for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The gentleman behind you.
There's a saying that says, if you are born poor, it is not your mistake. But if you die poor, it is your mistake. Therefore, we have to be determined so that we may be able to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right.
We have teachers that are not dedicated to their work. They don't attend us, they don't teach us. But we have textbooks. So in order for you to reach your goals, you should look through your textbooks and not depend on them, because your future is not where you live, but it is outside. You will go to university, you will get lecturers that will teach you stuff that you don't know. And yeah, for us to succeed, I think that we should bear in mind what we want and go for it no matter what obstacles we come across.
Yes, teachers don't attend us, but you need to use your mind. You need to think for yourself and know where you want to go. Have your goals, have your ambition. Be ambitious as a young person.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
If you sleep hungry, that don't control your future, where you're going, where you will be in the future. So the thing is, if you know what you want in life, you'll never go wrong.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And, you know, as we take more hands, I want to ask you another question, because I think you've adequately answered my first question. The youth of 1976 had a challenge of an education system that they did not support, that they felt they would not benefit from, and did something about it. So if you have challenges at schools, if you have, you know, kids that come to school hungry, if you have young learners or your peers that are using drugs, that are disrespectful to their teachers, what are you doing about it?
We're all doing life orientation in school, and life orientation includes substances, teenage pregnancy, and everything like that. So we all need to call our teachers, make a plan to call life coaches who will coach us and who will teach us about substances. Call those people who are smoking in school, who are drinking and doing substances, put them down, call them down to order, talk to them, and educate ourselves. At the end of the day, they will understand. Probably they are facing some challenges that we don't know. That's the reason why they're doing what they're doing. So if you call them and put them down to order, talk to them, we'll then find out what's wrong with them, and then we'll deal with the situation.
All
then
right.
the situation will come to an end.
All right, thank you so much. I'll have to take it back to my panel. I'll come back to you again for those comments. But I think what I'm getting from all of you, or most of you, is that we need to work together. You need not to have some sort of an entitlement issue. But I need to take it back to you, Vuyani. I mean, you are one of your school's quite bright students. How have you managed to, you know, be a top achiever, to, you know, educate yourself against all odds?
One thing I could say, I can say I rose above my obstacles, and I managed to be determined, to determine myself and calm myself, so that I cannot put blames on anyone else. So I know for the fact that it's my future. I don't have to rely on anyone else. So I don't have to blame my inadequate facilities, educational facilities. I have to utilize every tool that I got. You know, I don't have to. I've learned not to rely on blaming, on pointing fingers. I learned how to overcome circumstances and rely on my own, on my own.
All right. Yeah, and Tsepo, I mean, we've just heard, you know, some of course, the amazing stories they've shared with us, and some of the, you know, ways that they have shared in terms of, you know, dealing with whatever circumstances at ground level. They're quite optimistic young learners. But at the end of the day, do you feel or think that they should go through this?
Well, I guess, you know, the comments and the statements that came out are an indication of what Fanon said when he said every generation has its struggles. And one does get a sense that these young people here are starting to engage and define their struggles. And one thing we need to understand with young people going through these things is that the state or government is an enabler of conditions. So if conditions of learning and teaching are not adequate, if we still have 80% of schools in the country that do not have libraries, and 20% do have libraries, that is a cause for concern. The state needs to come in and create conditions. And that is when we can start now scrutinizing these young people and their teachers and the community, to start asking difficult questions to them, to say, why is it that these conditions have been created and you're not flourishing? As a country, we've done a lot. We've defied, you know, many odds. But we should not find ourselves, you know, being, you know, in a celebratory mood forever. At some point, we need to be aware that we need to roll our sleeves and start working. But definitely not. Young people, for instance, in Limpopo, there was a child, Michael Komape. This was a 6-year-old boy in his second week of schooling who died in a pit toilet. The mother came looking for him at the school after many hours when all the kids had arrived at home, Michael Komape was found in a pit toilet with his hand just, above the human feces. Now, those are the conditions that we should not be subjecting ourselves in. Schools in urban township, for instance, like in Soweto, do not experience the same conditions as young kids in Eastern Cape or Limpopo experience. But they do experience overcrowding, lack of school infrastructure. I mean, a story just broke in Kagiso. Many of our children, they will tell you horrific stories of the overcrowded classrooms. They will tell you horrific stories of having to share textbooks and having to teachers not coming in. I mean, you've heard now, young people are starting to speak out about their teachers. And this is where we need to hold teachers to account. SATU, as the biggest trade union movement in the country that is tasked with teaching working class poor black kids, needs to be held to account, because we still look up to that union to say, you are tasked with making sure that you move this country forward. In fact, they're an instrument that should be used to push back about the inequalities that I just mentioned. And currently, from young people who are saying, well, that is not happening.
Yeah, well, we have to take a short break right now. And when we come back, of course, we're closing off our show and we're getting remarks from our panel and also a few of our audience members as to a way forward. Where to from here? Well, welcome back to the show. We've reached the last segment of Sunday Live right here on SABC 1. Been quite a memorable and a learning curve for most of us right here, of course, who are in Soweto. As you know, we're broadcasting live from Soweto to learn more about June 16, 1976, but also about June 16, 2015, where we are taking the many more June 16s to come, of course, in the country. And as we're closing off, our conversation, we're going to take it right back to our audience members just to find out, closing comments as to where they are now and where they are going.
My advice to my fellow peers is that we should not let our backgrounds determine who we are, but let what our ambition and determination determine the way forward for us. And we should also take advantage of the facilities like the libraries that we have, that the government has built for us to our advantage, and just use them.
My advice to my fellow students is that we should not make poverty, crime, and unemployment the measure and the measure boundary that makes us not to succeed in life. It is said that losers let it happen and winners make it happen. So it is up to the palm of your hand that you make it or let it happen. So the future is in their hand. The government is doing very much job, but we have to meet the government halfway, because of half a loaf is better than nothing. The government cannot provide each and every need that you need, but just the government is meeting us halfway. We should not make these major things problems on making us not to succeed. I thank you.
Thank you so much. So you had a plan with the current Minister of Education that you're the next Minister of Education. I can see where this is going. All right. Thank you so much. Well, we have one of our teachers. Well, some actually of our teachers miss us. And I'd like to engage, one of our teachers. If the mic would just make its way, of course, to our teacher so that we can engage him on some of the concerns that the students raised. As you know, they raised particular concerns in schools, some surrounding their teachers. But yes, so thank you so much for joining us.
I'm seriously honored listening to this youth having this interesting discussion. I think that there's one thing that I learned out of the discussion here. Criticism. If you want to build yourself, take it as constructive. As a teacher, when learners are complaining that we are not attending classes, then I should make introspection, ask myself, am I one of those? And then, am I depriving these poor kids their education, their right to education? What are we going to do? To me, from here on, I mean, we'll be making a reflect back with my staff to say, guys, I was listening to kids complaining. Maybe they don't have that latitude to complain to you directly. But if they're talking about this kind of issues, let us address them. Absolutely. One thing again that I realize is that stakeholders, education system, it's a tripod system in a sense that the youth of 1976, they were having support from what? From parents. when they go to school, they get support from what? From the teachers as well. And then, if we can have that support, wherein it is the learner, it is the parent, and then here is the teacher, and then maybe we can win this.
Thank you so much, teacher. Thank you so much for your contribution. Well, I have to bring it back now to my panel, and let's hear your closing comments with regards to what's been said, and of course the overall discussion here. We'll start off with yourself.
We appreciate the opportunity that we have been given to interact with the young people. But from the June 16 Foundation point of view, mine was also to explain the Memorial Acre. We are following the footsteps of 1976 March. Out of the following the footsteps of 1976 March, when we had the discussions, there were activities that took place along the march. For instance, death of Dr. Heldenstein, death of Hector Peterson, Hastings Ndlovu, and so we said, how do we preserve that? Then we came back to Morris Isaacson, which was one of the schools that marched in 1976. We were not only doing around Morris, we'll be going to Skanantwana, Naledi High. And we look at this copy. This was just a mountain we refer as a copy, which was used by students when they were banking school. The churches were having, the indigenous churches were having church services here. The police used to hide within the scope itself when they were looking for tsietsi and monitoring the political activities at Morris Isaacson High. And that helped us to develop a concept document which resulted in the building of this Memorial Acre.
In your closing comments, anything that you would like to share with us, your suggestions perhaps in terms of also moving forward and what needs to be put in place, of course, to ensure that we don't have this conversation again?
No, what I can say is that to you, particularly young people, is that the future belongs to you and nobody can stop you. Who can stop you? No one. Who can stop you? No one. The future belongs to who? The future belongs to who? Us. Who can stop you? No one. That's right. Nobody can stop you. But now what we have as the foundation is a program that is going to unfold. We have got a career guidance program for schools in Soweto. We have the worker environment tours for these schools. We have a role modeling program. We have a university outreach program, a leadership training academy, Teacher Merit Award, where we are going to award teachers who are performing to their optimum. And we also have the Merit Award program for the schools, which are able to uphold a culture of learning and teaching. Now, all we are saying is that those who want to participate in the building of the schools and ensuring that there is a proper culture of learning and teaching, let them come forward. Let us not be practitioners and experts of doom. Let's not look at the negative. Let's make sure that we come together as young people, as pupils, as teachers, as community members. Let's put our hands together, our heads together, and make sure that we build a good South Africa. It starts from our schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to move now to you, Vuyani. I mean, as a young person who is sitting amongst, of course, people who have been a part of, fighting for equal education, adequate and equal education for you and your peers. What are you taking home from this information?
The future is in our hands as young students, as young people, as the youth. So we have to stay determined and focused all the time in order to brighten our future. So we have to have proper leadership from now in order to change the future.
Thank you so much, Vuyani. And I'm hoping that your peers, would actually internalize that, because it's coming from your same, peer. You're the same age groups. And I know sometimes we feel like adults are talking above us and they're imposing on us. But I think it's so powerful when it comes from someone that you're, in the same age group as. So thank you so much for that. And yourself, Tepo, I mean, as, equal education, there's more work to be done from yourself. I know that you're determined, of course, to ensure that every child in South Africa receives adequate and equal education. Where to from here, especially from your organization?
Well, from our organization, for the past 6-7 years, since our inception, we focused on school infrastructure because apartheid left us with a legacy of inadequate school infrastructure. And we have managed to get government to commit to defining what is a school through the norms and standards plan for school infrastructure. Because since 1994, we have been building schools without actually defining what is a school in this country. So schools will be built. Those schools will be expected to provide science without necessarily building science labs. Sports facilities, as young people have spoken about, sports facilities, computer labs, libraries that are either there or locked. But in trying to equalize the system, we defined infrastructure as one of the key factors. And we have that. The plan is there, and we'll be monitoring the delivery of school infrastructure, particularly around the issue of water and electricity and lack of sanitation in most schools, those that are in rural areas.
Well, thank you so much to you, Tshepo, and thank you to our panel members for joining us, of course, today, and imparting so much information. And I think the responsibility now is on all of us as young people to ensure that we do our part, and also to everyone at home to ensure that we participate. Concerns and points being raised about parents being a part of the solution, society being a part of the solution, churches, government being a part of the solution. Of course, we're heard. Thank you so much to all of you for joining me, and thank you so much to all of you for coming to the show and sharing your knowledge and how brilliant you are. But you know what? Mr. Dan actually created a little struggle nyana song for you there. And I'm actually proud because I've never had an Amandla, and I felt like, maybe Lina have something I've said Amandla too. So I heard just now we had our own. So he was saying, who can stop us? No one. Who can stop you? No one. Who's the future of South Africa? Us. Who is the future of South Africa? Alrighty, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to you at home as well for coming to join us right here on Sunday Live as we are here at the Memorial Acre in Soweto. I'm learning more about, of course, June 16. And because we are not live, unfortunately, I can't give you the results. But thank you so much for participating in our poll question, where we asked you if you feel the youth of today are, enjoying the fruits from the sacrifices of those heroines, who participated back in June 16, 1976. Of course, continue with the conversation on social media. On Facebook, we are Sunday Live and SABC1. On Twitter, we are at Sunday Live SABC1. You can tweet me at T_Motutwane. But from myself, Tumelo Motutwane and the Memorial Acre, thank you for joining us. Goodbye.
Freedom!